Toxic people never question their own attitudes. The simple fact that you evaluate yourself already proves that you are ready for real connections. If you have been through draining relationships, grew up in a complicated family dynamic, or had to deal with that narcissistic boss who seems straight out of a Wall Street movie, it is natural to carry some scars. Those who survive this type of environment often develop a silent and constant fear, that of becoming exactly the kind of person they had to escape from. The truth is that when we spend too much time in survival mode, we end up catching what psychology calls toxic fleas. These are defense mechanisms we learn so we don't get eaten alive. Perhaps there is an automatic defensive reaction when someone gives you feedback, or a tendency to isolate yourself too much to avoid conflicts, justifying it as a way to protect your own peace. It is easy to look at the monsters around us and point the finger, but it takes a lot of courage to look in the mirror and ask yourself if some of these reactive attitudes are actually pushing away the good people you want around, and that is okay. Having developed these defense mechanisms does not mean that someone's character is ruined. In fact, having the awareness to recognize this is the first and most important step to break the cycle and start attracting truly healthy relationships. But before you start carrying guilt that is not yours, you need to draw a very clear line to understand where a simple bad day ends and where true toxicity begins. Nowadays, the internet loves to hand out diagnoses. If you scroll through any social media feed for 5 minutes, you will think everyone is a narcissist in disguise. If someone cuts you off in traffic on Interstate 95, or if a friend cancels a weekend plan at the last minute because they are exhausted, the word toxic is thrown in the air as if it were a comma. But we need to be very careful with this contemporary extremism. There is a massive difference between having a toxic attitude and actually being a toxic person. Understanding this fine line is what will take a gigantic weight off your shoulders. All of us, without exception, are capable of having bad behaviors. Sometimes, work stress accumulates, bills come in higher than usual, and you end up giving a harsh answer to someone who didn't deserve it. Sometimes, you act selfishly, prioritizing your own needs and ignoring someone else's. Or you simply disappear and don't answer messages for days because your social battery is completely drained. Is this a toxic act? Yes, to a certain extent. But does that make you a manipulative monster? Absolutely not. This just makes you a flawed human being dealing with the weight of adult life. True toxicity does not lie in an isolated mistake, but rather in the intention, the frequency, and especially the total absence of remorse. A genuinely toxic person hurts others, uses sarcasm to belittle those around them to feel superior, and at the end of the day, sleeps like a baby without an ounce of guilt. When confronted, they turn the tables, say you are too sensitive, and use classic emotional blackmail. On the other hand, a healthy person who committed a toxic act feels the weight of the mistake. They feel that discomfort in their stomach, recognize they crossed the line, and try to fix things. If you feel guilty when you realize you hurt someone, or when you are unfair, you can breathe a sigh of relief. This remorse is living proof that your moral compass is working perfectly. However, to ensure these casual slip-ups don't become a destructive pattern and end up pushing away real connections, you need to master a skill that scares many people, but is the true filter for your personal growth. The painful but absolutely necessary art of self-evaluation is where the real game turns. Looking inward is scary, because no one wants to be the villain of their own story. We spend so much time diagnosing ex-partners, difficult relatives, or that controlling manager, that we often forget to do an honest audit of our own behavior. And here comes a very subtle trap that has destroyed many good relationships out there: the use of therapy language as a shield for questionable attitudes. Nowadays, there is a lot of talk about setting boundaries and protecting one's own energy, and rightfully so. But sometimes, it is common for people to start using the excuse of boundaries to justify pure selfishness or a lack of emotional responsibility. repeatedly canceling plans without caring about the other person's time, ghosting in the middle of an important conversation, or giving harsh answers and justifying it by saying I am just a direct person, is not setting boundaries. It is just being insensitive. It is very easy to reproduce unacceptable behaviors without realizing it, because in our heads we are just defending ourselves from a world that has hurt us before. After all, those who carry the weight of toxic relationships from the past tend to see any minor disagreement or demand as a personal attack. The great turning point happens when there is the courage to question one's own daily attitudes. After a heated argument or a frustrating interaction, try asking yourself sincerely, was I firm, or was I just cruel? Was I communicating my needs, or was I just punishing the other person for not reading my mind? Asking these questions is not a sign of weakness or low self-esteem. It is a gigantic sign of emotional intelligence and maturity. People who refuse to do this self-analysis live in an endless cycle of victimhood, thinking everyone is against them, when in fact they themselves are sabotaging their connections. However, the reality is that, as powerful as self-evaluation is, our minds can trick us when we are in the heat of emotion or blinded by our own triggers. To make sure you are not losing your touch or being unconsciously unfair, you must resort to a true trial by fire. The ultimate acid test to ensure you are not becoming what you abhor is your circle of trust and your ability to listen to feedback. People who are still trapped in their own traumas run from the truth like the devil runs from the cross. Toxic and manipulative individuals hate being contradicted, so they build bubbles around themselves, surrounding themselves only with flatterers who agree with everything, applaud any mediocre attitude, and never question their absurd behaviors. If you want to attract real relationships, your path must be exactly the opposite. As deep as your self-evaluation may be, we all have blind spots. Sometimes, in the middle of a Thanksgiving dinner, at a Sunday barbecue, or even at a simple after-work happy hour, you drop a comment that, in your head, seemed like just an innocent observation, but sounded completely passive-aggressive to whoever heard it. This is where the power of having sincere and highly trusted people around comes in. We are not talking about that office colleague who loves gossip, or that distant relative who always puts you down. We are talking about 2 or 3 real friends, people who have already proven their loyalty and genuinely root for your success. Having the courage to turn to these people and ask, hey, was I insensitive yesterday? Or do you think I lost the line in that argument? Is the highest level of maturity and emotional responsibility. Of course, hearing the answer can slightly scratch your ego, but you need to know how to differentiate destructive criticism from constructive advice. A toxic person who wants to belittle you attacks your identity, saying that you are selfish, problematic, or generally hard to deal with. A true friend, on the other hand, attacks only your isolated behavior. They will say, look, your attitude last night was a bit harsh. You didn't need to speak that way. They correct your course precisely because they value the relationship they have with you. Accepting this kind of feedback without getting defensive, without justifying your mistakes using the pain of the past, and without playing the classic victim, is the most magnetic habit you can cultivate. This is what separates who are just surviving from those who are actively healing their wounds. However, this street needs to go both ways. If you are learning to recognize your own flaws and accepting that you are a human being in constant evolution, the time comes when it is fundamental to rethink how you react when it is others who make those same slip-ups. It is very common that, upon discovering the psychology behind toxic relationships, our first reaction is to build insurmountable walls. The internet popularized the culture of quick and ruthless cutting. It only takes a friend forgetting to reply, a coworker making a tone-deaf joke, or a family member having a bad day for the narcissist label to be stuck on their forehead without the right to a defense. Zero tolerance has become a sort of medal of honor on the internet. But there is a gigantic and silent trap in cutting everyone out of your life at the slightest sign of discomfort. You end up becoming the dictator of your own relationships, isolated on an island of unattainable perfection where no one is good enough to stay. If you demand that the people around you never make mistakes, never have bad days, and never mess up, you are not looking for real friends or partners. You are demanding robots programmed not to bother you, and that, typically, is a controlling behavior. Not everyone who makes a mistake with you is an unrecoverable manipulator plotting against your peace. The vast majority of people are just trying to survive their own battles, dealing with the weight of an exhausting routine, financial pressures, or poorly healed traumas. They have heavy baggage. From time to time, they let that baggage drop on your foot, just like you do to them. It is fundamental to make it clear that this is, in no way, a free pass to endure real abuse. As we have already established, you should not tolerate premeditated manipulation, emotional blackmail, or any environment that threatens your mental and physical health. Your non-negotiable safety always comes first. However, when we talk about everyday friction, a partner who was a bit selfish during a stressful week, or a longtime friend who made an insensitive comment without realizing it, abrupt distancing is not the answer of a mature person. What these people need is not a phone block or your punitive silence. They need your patience, your tolerance, and a reality check through an honest dialogue. Instead of simply disappearing like a ghost at the first mistake, try using that same clean communication you would like them to use with you. Turn to the person and say, "Look, the way you spoke to me yesterday was unacceptable and hurt me." Give the other person the opportunity to understand the impact of their own action, feel the weight of the mistake, and try to fix it. Truly deep relationships are not built in the absence of conflicts, but rather in the mature way two people resolve these frictions and choose to evolve together. Having the wisdom to forgive the deviations of others and offer help when you realize someone is just lost in their own triggers is what separates a frightened survivor from someone who has finally found their own axis. And when you reach this level of maturity, where you can evaluate your own flaws honestly and have structured empathy for the mistakes of others, an incredible and almost magnetic side effect begins to transform your entire reality. This magnetic effect is what we call affective responsibility in practice. When you stop pointing your finger exclusively outward and take responsibility for your own flaws, your energy changes completely. Emotionally mature people, those solid friendships and life partners who are truly worth it, can sniff out this self-awareness from miles away. They are not looking for someone perfect, free of baggage, or who never makes a mistake. What good and healthy people look for is someone who has the humility and courage to say, "I was wrong, I crossed the line, I'm sorry, let's fix this." Admitting a mistake without putting a right after is the most attractive and powerful habit you can develop. It is the ultimate proof that you are not a toxic person. Because, as we have seen, manipulators would rather swallow glass than admit they are wrong. When you normalize the act of evaluating yourself and apologizing genuinely, you create an environment so safe and shielded that energy vampires, narcissists, and emotional leechers simply walk away naturally. They hate the light of responsibility. They have no room to operate in a life where the cards are on the table and communication is transparent. True healing is not building an impenetrable fortress to hide from the world, but rather establishing a level of maturity that naturally filters who enters and who stays. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your own connections. And now, I want to propose a real challenge to test how your self-development journey is going. Dig into your memory and leave it here in the comments. Was the last time you swallowed your own pride and sincerely apologized for a mistake you made with someone? Let's transform this space into an environment where growth is the rule and not the exception. See you in the next video.